This week's episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast is brought to you by SugarCRM. If your sales team is struggling to close deals, SugarCRM can introduce you to modern, insight-driven sales. Energize your CRM with Sugar. Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells. We're the editors of Manufacturing.net and Industrial Equipment News, and we each have more than 20 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. But before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. We're also live every Thursday, so subscribe to us on YouTube at IEN Magazine so you can get a notification when we go live and help mix it up in the live chat. Jeff, how you doing this week?
Pretty good, man. How about you?
I'm doing great. I don't know if you heard, but there was a bit of news about the podcast this week.
Really?
Yeah.
David, I did not know that. What could it be?
Well, let me tell you, Jeff. And Anna, I'm not sure if you're hip to this game yet either, but they did a list of the top 100 podcasts in manufacturing, and we're on the list.
You don't say. What number on the list, David?
Can you believe it? We're pretty high, actually. I was going to, sometimes they send you those things and they're like, hey, you made a list. And you're like, great, of 100. Ooh, where are we? And we're not number 1, Jeff, but we're number 2.
Pretty solid.
Number 2.
Number 2 is pretty great. And especially now that my family is basically lives in the first is the worst, second is the best. That's kind of where we're living right now. I feel like it just really holds up here.
Not sure I understand that.
Oh, it's because, I live with small children and they race it. And every time somebody wins, the other one's like, well, no, the first is the worst and the second is the best.
Oh, okay.
Which, again, holds up for this very specific example.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I thought that was pretty cool to be recognized by FeedSpot. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to, first of all, surprise both of you live, clearly.
Yeah.
Blow your minds. And, just thank everybody that's been listening, watching, being with us live every week. We really appreciate it. Jeff, hey, we're number 2.
Solid.
Still.
No, we're very excited, especially because the number 1 podcast, great show, different from ours, though.
Yeah.
So when you look at what we do, standing out, being that high on the list, that's pretty cool.
We just need to make it a little more niche. So it's like top 100 manufacturing podcasts. How about the top 10 manufacturing news podcasts?
Something like that.
Then we're
number 1.
Then we're number
Yep.
1. We slice it. Anna, what'd you think of the news?
Great. Yeah,
disappointed.
She just comes out
down.
like, didn't care for it.
I'm not like a walking no fear t-shirt. I can handle being in second place out of 100.
Just, you have those, man, what was that brand with the jeans? Affliction? Yeah.
Those were T-shirts.
T-shirts,
Maybe
okay.
it was worn out.
Okay, either way, they were more bedazzled. But no, I thought it was great. So congratulations, guys. We're doing it. We're doing it. All right, before we jump into our first story this week, we have another word from our friends at SugarCRM. This week's episode is brought to you by our friends at SugarCRM. If your sales team is struggling to close deals, you need to read How to Close More Deals in Manufacturing, a new guide to modern, insight-driven sales. Many manufacturers sit on mountains of data about their customers. However, few sales teams leverage all this data to unlock new sales opportunities, boost pipeline output, strengthen customer relationships, and realize complementary sales add-ons. So, stop missing out on new sales and download How to Close More Deals in Manufacturing right now. There is a link in the live chat as well as in the body copy, our first story this week. JetZero's $4.7 billion plant, 14,500 jobs in North Carolina. JetZero last week announced plans to build its first manufacturing plant for a next-generation passenger jet. The project in central North Carolina could create more than 14,500 jobs in 10 years, over 10 years. It is the largest job commitment in North Carolina history. The California startup plans to build the $4.7 billion factory at the Greensboro Airport. The factory will make JetZero's fixed-wing Z4 aircraft, which the company says will be 50% more fuel efficient than traditional airliners. JetZero already has received about $300 million in investment. That includes a grant from the U.S. Air Force to build and fly a demonstrator model within just 2 years. United Airlines and Alaska Airlines have also invested and have made conditional purchase agreements for their fleets. JetZero believes its planes could go into service in the early 2030s. Once production is ramped up, likely by 2036, the goal is to make 20 Z4 airplanes every month. Jeff, it really seems like not just the U.S., but the entire world is not just ready for a new player in commercial aerospace, but also a new plane.
Yeah, it is unique with the no wing, fixed wing, bi wing, whatever we're going with, type of look. Very unique. I mean, this is basically what the B-2 and the B-21 bombers are using. It's sort of been avoided for a lot of commercial aircraft because it's not as maneuverable as the more traditional look.
Yeah.
So I think there's just, in addition to a unique design, potentially a real competitive differentiator here from Boeing and Airbus. There's a lot of other good stuff here. We'll put the sort of economic stuff aside and what that means to the local economy. But not that 14,000 jobs is anything to sneeze at. That's a great thing. But I think that a lot of the positives that we're seeing here in terms of, number one, is just the pace that they're really looking to go at here. JetZero is saying this is going to take us at least another 6 years before we even have a plane in the sky that's commercially viable.
Yeah.
That's actually reassuring to me.
I agree.
Based on everything that we've been that has been going on in aerospace, unfortunately, some of the stuff we're going to talk about a little bit later as well.
Yeah.
That does make me feel good. I think it also demonstrates an organic industry knowledge or sector knowledge that everybody involved with this company has. When you look at all the key players from the top down, the founders to everybody that's handling supply chain, there's a ton of experience in aerospace, aviation, plane building, manufacturing, all of that. Yeah. So again, a lot of good stuff going on here. I think even when you look at what their goal of getting to 20 planes a month, that's roughly 40-ish% of where Boeing and Airbus are on a monthly basis.
Okay.
So that even tells me there's a lot of really, like, the expectations are real.
Yeah.
They're not trying to blow people away with anything. They're definitely on pace with where they need to be. I think also just for the aerospace industry, we've talked about these backlogs forever that Boeing and Airbus are dealing with. Having this third player, which we've also championed for a while, in a way, nobody wants more competition, but they would almost have to see this as a benefit too, potentially. I think a lot of the quality concerns and a lot of the supply chain issues that they have right now are because they're trying to meet these huge backlogs. And along the way, they're also losing orders because it takes so long to fill, they go away. Yeah. Having this third player potentially, I think is going to make everything better. It's going to put less pressure on those manufacturing environments. It's also going to help from a consumer perspective in terms of how that trickles down to the airlines and having more options, better planes available sooner, being able to not be under so much pressure from a maintenance perspective for older planes because, again, the backlog ideally will be reduced. So we are rooting for JetZero here big time, want this to come together. Everything seems to make sense, especially when you look at the backing, not only from the folks that you mentioned. Delta has also actually kind of giving it an endorsement. They haven't put any financial support into it, but they've also gotten on board and trying to work with JetZero here. So with all these factors moving in the right direction, what could possibly go wrong?
Well, I like it because it's not sandbagging. It's realistic expectations and a realistic timeline. And it really makes you think like, okay, if what happens to Boeing and Airbus if they're not trying to like outmake each other? What happens if they're actually trying to out-innovate one another? You know, where it's actually like, okay, this is a completely new design. And I like that you said the B-2 bomber because I look at it and I'm like, oh, it's like the truest sense of a paper airplane. But I mean, we're close. And I really like what a new competitor, albeit very small, brings to the market. Anna, so One thing that stood out to me here is that, so North Carolina is always going to have Kitty Hawk, right? And the first manned powered flights by the Wright brothers in 1903. Governor Josh Stein even said, North Carolina was first in flight. We are also the future in flight. Man, do you think if they knew how much of an impact that moment would have in history, they'd be like, hold on a second, let's rename this area. Let's get Kitty out of the name. Just let's get something a little less juvenile.
You know what I appreciate, David, is the hard-hitting questions. I think that's what got us.
That's what got us to number 2.
It got us to number 2.
I know. But on this point, it's hard. No, I just like how no matter what, the area is always going to be known as the birthplace of modern flights, and I just like that it's called Kitty Hawk. You're welcome.
We can start calling it Wright Brothers Hawk.
Yeah, the Wright Hawk.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Soaring Hawk.
Soaring Hawk. Yeah. Working titles. These are all good. Get them in the mix.
Yep. Call us if you want.
Yeah. It's been about
North
120
Carolina.
years.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're looking for a facelift. No. What do you think of what's going on with JetZero?
Jeff really elaborated on this, a lot of it. What I was thinking as well, looks like it could be an exciting project for North Carolina. We talked a lot about what is it going to take to get another commercial player into this industry and take some of the pressure off Boeing and Airbus? Because to your point, I do think it is pressure at this point. Maybe it is this all-wing design that's going to add so much fuel savings, because you touched on the supply chain stuff a lot and the productivity and all that, how they're being hampered by their backlogs. And that is certainly true as well. But I also think we're seeing major carriers put an investment stake into this project because it's going to save them money to operate.
Yeah.
I mean, 50% less fuel.
That's incredible.
Incredible. That's massive. That's a massive operating cost for them. So even to just kind of see it play out, that may be worth it to United, to Delta, to Alaska, to just see what happens here. And the other thing, the credibility of this team, and you mentioned it as well, but if you go to JetZero's website, they actually have all the headshots of their leaders, and underneath them, the logo of where they gained their relevant experience. And you have Boeing, Airbus, Northrop Grumman, GE, Honeywell, Gulfstream. I mean, it's just, so I think they're really trying to speak to here, here's why we think we can do it. We're not just some startup that's trying to, strategically break into an industry because we see an opportunity or a gap there. It's because we actually have the pedigree in order to do it. And I agree, the timeline is reassuring because it's, we've become so accustomed to seeing these companies shoot up from nothing with private equity backing, and within a year they're publicly traded, and they're, it's all over promise, under deliver. And so our expectations, I feel like at this point, are like, well, can you really? And so for someone to approach it from a very pragmatic standpoint, say this is what it's going to take, that is reassuring to me as well. I will always be a little bit skeptical of really long-term proposals. Yeah. I mean, especially ones where we're estimating economic development numbers into the 2036. No, 2060s they were talking about. Like, and 2036 for the jobs, right? Yeah. And, even then, like average pay rate targets for a job 10 years from now. Yeah. What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
I mean, so it'll be the equivalent, right? So like the average salary, minimum salary is going to be like $90,000. That's got to be in like today's bucks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they're not accounting for inflation there. But
a lot of time to move some talent into the area.
Yep. Yep. And also like move the goalposts, but hopefully not. It would be nice to see this work out well for North Carolina. It looks like it's the right place for it. So.
Well, and one thing that stood out to me too is that, these planes are also built to fly on hydrogen fuel as well, which could be an incredible opportunity. What do you think United Airlines spent on fuel just last year?
It's a great question. How much?
$4.4 billion. That puts them at the top of the top 10, but like the top 3 are all north of $4 billion. So that, I mean, when you're talking about 50% savings,
that's a number. Yeah.
That can make some real impact for those companies. I also thought that the incentives package was pretty realistic in terms of what they're looking at. I was very excited by this story and look forward to following it. I mean, if you guys remember the first time when we started looking at the specs of this prototype, this was one of those stories where it's just like, oh man, that would be great, wouldn't it? But you get so used to seeing these new designs that you're just like, if only someone would take a chance and actually make it. And they're doing it. All right. Well, our next most popular story. Yaskawa moving headquarters from Illinois to Wisconsin. Yaskawa America plans to invest $180 million to expand its footprint in Wisconsin. Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers said the company is moving its North American headquarters to the state and will create more than 700 new jobs in the process. The company is expanding its current facility in Franklin, Wisconsin, which is about 15 miles southwest of Milwaukee and a little more than 40 miles north of current operations in Waukegan, Illinois. The project will take 8 to 10 years to consolidate the company's Illinois and Wisconsin facilities into a new 800,000 square foot campus. Yaskawa is seeing significant growth in multiple divisions, including robotics, motion control, AC drives, and its solar inverter business. According to Dennis Fitzgerald, VP of Customer Satisfaction at Yaskawa America, many employees at the Waukegan facility actually live in the northern part of Illinois, so their commute might actually be shorter to the new location. For those living a little bit further south, the company is hoping to find opportunities to relocate those workers. And given the project timeline, he says that some associates will likely retire before the new headquarters even comes online. Over the next 6 years, the majority of manufacturing work in Franklin will be for the company's Drives and Motion Products division. In the next 10 to 20 years, Fitzgerald says robotics will grow to a significant part of the company's Wisconsin operations. The Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation is supporting the project with up to $18 million in performance tax-based credits. And Jeff, the first thing I wanted to ask you is Illinois the new California in terms of a lot moving out, not a lot moving in? But also, you had a really good question as we were working on the podcast, like, are these 700 new jobs or relocated jobs? I just wanted to start by saying thank you to Dennis Fitzgerald for being an incredible asset and helping me put this story together. He got back to me right away, and he said, yes, it will be 700 additional jobs over the next 10 years, and that does not include the current headcount.
Wow, that's great. Yaskawa is one of those companies we've actually followed quite a bit since we came on board with even the previous company we were with.
Yeah.
And that was because they really had a very astute assessment of what the market was needing.
Yeah.
The big thing was variable frequency drives. That was really what put them on the map and driving a lot of those energy efficiency needs for a lot of the capital equipment and automation expenditures and investments that were going on throughout U.S. manufacturing. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really what sort of put them on our radar initially, and we've seen them evolve over time into robotics. I remember going to the shows, they had the robotic bartender and stuff like that. Oh, yeah. So a lot of cool stuff that's come out of this company, so it's fun to see them also investing and expanding here. The pace is very interesting to me, and I wonder if this is not something we're going to see more and more of, just based on a lot of the uncertainties that are impacting manufacturers and their expenditures and how they're planning right now. Mm-hmm. Just a lot of unknowns that are impacting their day-to-day. So I thought that was interesting. Going 8 to 10 years, I think there's definitely a focus on their workforce as well in forecasting that far out, which makes sense. But also I think it shows confidence in this geography, that they feel good about being in Wisconsin or southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois, however you want to look at it, or really the Midwest. They've got a number of plants. So it was also reassuring to see that. So a lot of very positive things here. Mm-hmm. And I do wonder if this is going to be a little bit of a template for a lot of these bigger expansions that we see in terms of spreading it out. Yeah. We just saw it with ZeroJet, which is different. I mean, that's a very different operating dynamic. But even for something like drives and motors and a lot of motion control products, maybe it does make sense right now to be careful with how you scale.
Yeah. Like JetZero we had before and Yaskawa. Now we're seeing more of these projects that are like, we're going to take our time. We're going to do it right. And that's great because, I mean, aren't they still trying to fill that like Motorola facility that, everything gets built right away and then they're just like, we got to roll. It's not going to work out. Anna, in just 2 years ago in 2023, Yaskawa actually bought this plant in Franklin. It was a 200,000 square foot building they bought for $20 million. And I got to say, it is looking like that panned out to be a pretty solid investment, not just for Yaskawa, but for Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I think it does serve as evidence to reflect this methodical approach that they're taking. This is clearly not a decision whipped up based on the latest incentive package dangled in front of Yaskawa.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if you're a 110-year-old company, maybe 8 to 10 years isn't that big of a deal to you.
Yeah.
In the context of that, just in the grand scheme of things, you know, keep things rolling at a sustainable pace. But, you know, I looked at WEDC, Wisconsin Economic Development Commission, had some interesting stats on their website as it pertains to how they are recruiting manufacturers and other related projects to the state. And they list Wisconsin as being number 2 in the nation for manufacturing employment concentration, with a 0.4% manufacturing tax rate that they say is permanently in Wisconsin's tax code, in support of 8,800 plus companies and nearly 500,000 workers. So
Wisconsin's number 2 too.
They're number 2 too.
I like it.
Yeah.
We got a thread.
And we are in Wisconsin now, so some complex math equation has to come out of this. I don't know what it is, some sort of
I'm going to start working on
square root situation. Yeah.
I got it.
He's beautiful minded.
I got it.
He's hitting his
Hold
keys.
on. I'm going to hit my keys dramatically.
Do we need to put like a glass like enclosure around you just so you can write on with the marker?
Probably something softer.
Someone get David a whiteboard.
I mean, I should probably be surrounded in something, and it might need to be like fabric based, not glass.
Wow, you go so dark so fast.
Yeah, no glass.
I was thinking bouncy house.
Okay.
Nah, I wasn't. Sorry, Anna.
So anyway, you know, we know that there's a lot of Midwestern states that are courting these manufacturers intensely, right? But I think it probably mattered in this case that Waukegan is literally 10 miles from the Wisconsin border.
Yeah.
And when you look at maybe the tax and economic development implications of just jumping over that border, you almost see it as like a liability for these states that are, you know, adjacent to maybe a much lower cost to operate state.
Yeah.
How they got to be looking at some of those border those border companies, because you know, now Yaskawa is in this position of maybe being able to largely maintain their existing skilled workforce to make this move.
Yeah.
It takes a lot out of that equation for them. So it's not something I ever really thought about, but I'm sure that the states are. You should
be very mindful of that.
Paying attention to that, like who is at risk of making this leap? I don't know.
Well, especially in areas like Illinois, their governor's been taking a lot of heat about businesses leaving the state, not necessarily bringing any new businesses in.
Yeah, and they've been doing. You know, Illinois still has a very robust business environment. They have the Chicagoland area, which is responsible for a lot of like logistics and tons of other types of businesses. But yeah, if you're looking head to head, if you're that close to the border and you're looking head to head on, say, like corporate costs, it could be easy for you to make that decision, especially if you have WEDC saying, hey, we'll help support it with $14 million or whatever they're doing there. So.
Yeah, what do you need? It looks like a safe bet for both parties. You know, Jeff, you sort of mentioned it a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of spotlight Yaskawa's very impressive, like Motoman robotics division, because that's something that I always look forward to at IMTS and other trade shows, because they always have incredible cells, incredible demonstrations as to what they're really capable of. You know, their arc and spot welding cells. When we talk about in the next 10 to 20 years, business in Wisconsin is going to all be robotics. It makes sense, right? You know, we need like 750,000 welders, you know. I don't see that changing anytime soon. That's only going to get worse. So we're going to need more of these cells. Material handling, assembly, painting, picking and packing. A lot of machine tending that we've seen at shows recently, Anna, as well as metal forming. And it's just... You know, you look at their lineup of robotics and then you think of what we have in terms of a skills gap, talent gap, and just open positions. And you think that, you know, there are going to be some incredible changes that come to the manufacturing landscape when it comes to roles that robotics are going to be playing. And I do think that, you know, 10 to 20 years, I don't know, I think it's going to happen a little sooner. But that's just That's just me talking to the overlords. And, I've been thinking about it, Jeff, the idea of having like glass and some sort of whiteboard that I can just constantly scribble notes on. I do like that.
All right.
I do like that. Like season 3 of the podcast.
Season 3?
Yeah.
Is this the longest second season we've ever?
I think we're still in season 1.
Show ever?
Yeah.
He's going to come out and be like,
yeah,
there is no Carol in HR. We'll be like, David.
Just the pins and the yarn. Yeah. No, we're technically still in season 1. Like, we're season 1, episode 225.
Impressive.
So season 3, that puts us out. Wow. Out there.
But wait till season 2. There's going to be some really like exciting stuff.
True. That's okay. The whiteboard, season 3, the pins and the yarn.
Yeah.
Okay. That's season 2.
Maybe some new cast members.
Oh, no. No. Oh, man. Oh, that's age math. And that makes me sad. All right. Well, our next most popular story.
Kidding.
Major retailer, the latest to pin bankruptcy on tariff environment. At Home is a retailer first established in 1979. Just a few years ago, the brand was bought by private equity for $2.8 billion. It has 260 stores, more than 7,000 employees, and now it's filing for bankruptcy. The company was boosted by pandemic spending, but now it is looking at skyrocketing heavy freight costs and supply chain disruptions. The company, once valued at $2.8 billion, now has about $2 billion in debt. Company leaders say today's consumer spends less than they did just a few years back due to reduced confidence and economic uncertainty. At Home is also blaming tariffs. The company sources 90% of its goods from overseas. It doesn't look all bad that $2 million in debt will be wiped out based on agreements with the company's lenders and other debtors, people holding their debt. Still, the company will close 26 stores. While the company remains optimistic it can make it through this, Neil Saunders, managing director of Global Data, said that even if the retailer is able to tackle its debt, the dynamics that are contributing to the purchasing slowdown are, quote, unlikely to change in the near term. Jeff, we've mentioned this before a couple of times on the podcast, but it really seems like, are tariffs the new scapegoat?
It feels like it here. I mean, there are some very real circumstances where tariffs are having an impact, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show too. But in this one, At Home was definitely having some issues before the Trump administration came into power here. I mean, excuse me, when you look at how they scaled, and it's just interesting with a lot of these legacy retailers, private equity gets involved and lenders get involved, and they just do not want to let go. They do just not want to let these stores die. Look how long it took Toys R Us, Kmart, Sears. Somebody was always trying to come to the rescue and revamp them because I think they see the number of individuals that do still go to some of these brick and mortars, or they see the opportunities that can be realized online. At Home has a history going back to like 2004 in terms of who they were, and at numerous steps until they were rebranded in 2016, they were failing. Yeah. Even as close as recently as 2019, they were struggling. They went from, like, when they went public, they went from like 100, and I had the number here up, I can't find it now. Anyway, they drove from 100 and here it was. They went up to 200. They were at 115 stores in 29 states. By 2021, they were at 225 stores in 40 states. Oh. That was basically boosted by the pandemic and a lot of online sales that was going into home furnishings and things of that nature. Right after the pandemic sort of ended and people started getting back to normal, the company dropped again. Yeah. And that's what's going on here. They struggle with their e-commerce. They struggle to be different in the marketplace. And if they're sourcing 90% of their goods from overseas, that's kind of on them. That's not a tariff issue. Yeah. They've been struggling with sales for a long time, probably because all of these retailers try to scale up and get more locations to take advantage of greater purchasing power, which helps improve margins that are already super thin. Yeah. This is not a tariff thing, okay? And what frustrates me so much is when these companies continue to bring up these tariff issues, is it muddies the water on what we're really trying to solve here. Yeah. Now, you can feel however you want to about tariffs, but there are some areas where these could potentially help U.S. manufacturing. This is from the U.S. Trade Council. And when you look at the biggest areas where there is a huge trade deficit, number one is industrial machinery. Now, we were just talking about Yaskawa and all the things that they're doing there. They're investing in U.S. manufacturing. They can use some tariff support on stuff that's being imported when it comes to all those drives and motors and everything else that they're doing.
Yeah.
One of the other big ones is electronics. Okay, another area where some of these tariffs could help support U.S. manufacturing as they compete against stuff coming in from Asia.
Yeah.
Automotive is another one. We've talked about vehicles being made in Mexico as opposed to here. Again, these tariffs could help balance this and make this fair and present opportunities for U.S. manufacturers. So when somebody like At Home, who has been struggling and has a lot of their own internal issues, brings tariffs into the conversation, they're hurting everybody else, because if you look more closely at it, tariffs are not their problem.
Yeah.
They have a business model issue.
Yeah. Well, and we have to realize that, okay, we're back to normal after COVID, right? But there were 2 years where that was the new normal. Yeah. And so I understand, like companies making decisions because they might not believe that we're ever going back to what normal was. But I mean, how many stores did you say they opened? Like
they were up
doubled their footprint?
Yeah, they went from, they were in 29 states, 115-ish stores to 240 stores in 40 states.
Yeah.
Again, you're growing too fast. It doesn't make sense. And they talked about in this article, they wanted to at one point get up to 600 stores. That seems ridiculous when you're looking at the level of debt that they now are facing.
So, and a lot of people, including a lot of our readers on the site, were just not buying the tariff talk either. One in particular was Nolan, not our Nolan, different Nolan. I mean, no one owns him. He says, that's rich. Pile up a $2 billion debt during the 4 years of the previous administration and then blame the tariffs for your poor financial management. Oh, yeah. Also blame the consumer. Maybe stop sourcing 90% of your products from overseas. I don't know. I feel like, we try and cover the industry and the impacts tariffs are going to have on it. And then sometimes when you get stories like this where it seems like they're using it as a scapegoat, I think that sometimes hurts the credibility of other manufacturers that are truly struggling as a result of these new tariffs.
I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a scapegoat. I think I have a different perspective on this, but I think it can be on them and also on tariffs.
And tariffs being like the final nail.
Yeah, I mean, because if you look at we've seen this come up a couple times in the last week or two, and we will talk about another story later in the podcast in automotive. But these companies that do have other problems, right? They're dealing with post-pandemic business conditions. They maybe scaled too fast. They maybe acquired a lot of debt based on market conditions outside of not responding to things quickly enough, not dealing with e-commerce fast enough, not having a good brand identity. All those things exist for a company like At Home. And then when you add to it the fact that they suddenly have all this pressure on their margins because of tariffs, because they're buying everything from overseas. Lots of retailers do that, by the way. Yeah. And then secondly, I think that when they talk about reduced confidence and economic uncertainty, those can also be associated with tariffs. That's what we're hearing all the time right now.
100%,
is that people are pulling back because they don't understand the environment that we're in or what's happening, what's going to change. So for a company like this, who has, yes, admittedly made some mistakes in the last couple of years, and they're trying to kind of pull themselves back from the cliff, the tariffs, I think, are pushing them over the cliff.
No, that's
and so I think it's okay. They didn't just say it's only because of tariffs, but they did say hey, this is a thing that is also influencing, we believe, customer behavior, or it's really making it hard for us to pull ourselves out of this debt because suddenly we're in this environment that is not very amenable to our business model. Yeah. So I think you can say, I mean, obviously we've seen lots happen in this segment specifically, like retail home products, Pier 1 Imports, Bed Bath & Beyond, these category stores that are very specific to one type of product line. They are kind of going the way of the dinosaur because of e-commerce. And if you look at what they offer online, it being very narrow, you can buy a stack of bath towels from Amazon and not tack on the $8.95 shipping that you would get from Bed Bath & Beyond or whatever.
Yeah.
I think they're really struggling to find their niche within the internet.
Yeah.
Again, huge problem. But I don't think that we should say that tariffs are completely disregard the role of tariffs in this conversation, because I think there is a role there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the number one thing. But if you are already facing all these variables and you're like on the verge of catastrophe, we've seen like, again, multiple companies in the last couple of weeks that have said like, hey, we came into this in like on tenuous footing and the tariffs are, that's it. Like we cannot come out from underneath this in this business environment.
No, that's a really good point. Like, and when I say like a scapegoat, that's, it's what everybody's talking about, right? That's how you get attention to the problem that you're facing, is that you say like, hey, yeah, we got a lot of problems, but tariffs are really not doing us any favors. And we've seen a number of companies that are able to sort of manage the waters right now. They're kind of like in a holding pattern. And others that have actually been doing really well as people try to move their supply chain, sourcing more from machine shops and the like within the U.S. So, I mean, we have seen every different side of the equation. The other was that it really seemed like people used this story to as another cautionary tale of private equity. A person on the site who goes by Bump said, imagine that another business bought by private equity is filing for bankruptcy. And I just, hey, sometimes that's just a cheap shot. Let's leave private equity alone. They're the innocent victim here, right? Right? Right. Good. Right. All right. Right. Our next...
Pick the right partner.
Yeah. And what is it? Due diligence?
Yes.
Really double and triple up on it. All right. Our next most popular story. Boeing Flight with more than 240 aboard crashes after takeoff. An Air India plane bound for London crashed in a residential area of Ahmedabad shortly after takeoff on Thursday, killing at least 270 people, including 241 on board. One passenger, amazingly, survived. The Boeing 787 was bound for London. A video of it showed the jet slowly descending as if it were landing. But as soon as it disappeared out of view, a giant fireball burst into the sky. According to the Aviation Safety Network database, this is the first crash of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Boeing said it was, quote, working to gather more information. The aircraft gave a mayday call signaling an emergency, but then did not respond to the calls made by the air traffic control. Aviation consultant John Cox, the CEO of Safety Operating Systems, told the AP it appeared the aircraft had its nose up and was not climbing. Investigators are studying the black boxes, which were recovered about 2 days ago. Anna, the plane that crashed was 12 years old. And while other Boeing planes have had ongoing safety problems, there was hope with the 787 that it wouldn't suffer the same fate. And that was one of the parts of the story that really stood out to me, was that this was, albeit, an incredibly tragic and evolving situation, but it was also the first tragic accident that involved the 787, which was supposed to be sort of the new crown jewel for Boeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the plane itself had a very clean record. One of its engines was brand new. They just put it in March. The other one was up to date on its, its maintenance procedures and no issues there. I think we need to be pretty cautious about speculating based on the limited amount of information that we have at this time. We still don't really know. We don't really know if it was a mechanical issue or a maintenance problem, something like weather, human error, any of that stuff. Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
We do know about that Mayday call.
Mm-hmm.
And new reports are suggesting that the emergency power system was activated at the time of the crash, which is something that is said to engage automatically when there's an engine problem or if hydraulic system pressure levels get too low.
Okay.
So that may point to where the issue was. It still doesn't tell us what happened or why, right? The engines were made by GE Aerospace. They don't follow necessarily a fixed maintenance schedule. They have a system that they're equipped with that's called the Full Authority Digital Engine Control, and that is designed to continuously monitor the engine health and performance.
Okay.
So, theoretically, you should receive an alert if it's ever out of spec with where it should be. And then the decision to service or replace the engine is based on that data, and then also physical inspections. So again, like we talked about with the issue I think it was last week on the podcast about the cockpit situation and the plane that had to be evacuated.
Oh, yes.
And so and how, like, even though, if that's a maintenance issue, it still becomes a Boeing issue. And
Right.
I think in this case, we're going to see that again, right?
Right.
The blowback could be on Air India, could be on GE Aero, but it's most certainly going to be on Boeing.
Oh, definitely.
It always is. We know that the company's stock tanked immediately when this story broke. It put a cloud over the Paris Air Show, which Boeing rival Airbus announced like millions of dollars in orders, and Boeing decided not to do that. They elected not to share any sales data that week because of the crash. And to add to their bad week, yesterday, the NTSB issued an urgent warning about the potential for certain jet engines that, when damaged, allow smoke to enter the cockpit. Those are for Boeing 737 MAX jets.
Yeah.
Again.
Another one for the MAX,
Yep.
yeah.
And on certain Airbus planes. So it just, it's hard to know what to take away from this because we cover Boeing extensively, and it seems like every time they have a good week, they have 4 bad weeks after it.
Yeah.
And again, there's just so much we don't know about this situation. But what we do know is that it's going to be bad for Boeing.
Yeah.
It always is bad for Boeing.
Well, so last week was the NTSB was talking about the fuel leak that led to the American Airlines engine fire in the Colorado flight. And that was a Boeing 737-800. But just the week before that, the previous podcast, what did we talk about? Boeing had a pretty good week.
They had a pretty good
week. It made news because they had a pretty good week. Actually, Anna, one of the things that I took away from this was that, you talk about the maintenance schedule and everything connected to the engines, is that now that we are living in this era of IoT, that hopefully there will be more information to kind of, rather than just trying to like parse it together with whatever remains of the black box. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just wishful thinking, but because there is more technology on everything, you get a few more answers than you typically would in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it should be data that's already stored, you know. So, and they did recover that black box. So they do believe that they will figure out what happened, but we just don't know a lot yet.
Jeff, when you look at this story, to Anna's point, it's a developing story, right? And I mean, it's probably going to be 6 to 12 months before we really get a idea of what the NTSB concludes from their investigation or the safety agencies involved. What were some of your immediate takeaways when this 787 went down?
Well, immediate takeaways. I mean, shock, stunned. All the things. I think with time, though, I guess I disagree with you guys. I don't think this is going to come back on Boeing because of the, it's going to sound terrible, but like the extreme loss of life here, that's where the focus is right now. And on figuring out what happened, unless it comes back and it is a glaring mechanical issue with this particular plane like it was in those other crashes, I think Boeing actually may be okay here. I think the focus is going to go more on Air India. And was something, what did they not do? What should they have done? Was there a human error? Was this unavoidable? Those types of things. I think because there is such a focus on all the loss.
The tragedy,
I think Boeing might skirt this a little bit more than they did the other ones. Because in the other instances, all there was to talk about was the plane and a maintenance failure or a mechanical issue. So they may be a little bit different there. I'm not as optimistic in terms of finding out what actually happened. When you're looking at a full fuel tank there, I mean, when they talk about things just being absolutely scorched.
Not there anymore.
Yeah, I don't know how much they can find out. I mean, because everything that held those data, even those black boxes, they were in pieces.
Yeah.
Like it was not a great recovery process. I'd be very surprised if we get a clear picture on what actually happened here.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm wrong, but that would be my initial takeaway. One of the interesting connections with this is this airline is owned by Tata Group.
Mm-hmm.
Tata Motors and a lot of different infrastructure and a lot of different manufacturing within India, which, as we know, does have a global implications with a lot of people that work with them. So if they were in the process, they bought this airline actually from the Indian government in 2022. They were actually starting to rebuild it up. They had something like 500 planes on back order. So the impact that this could have on them potentially and the fallout that they could receive if it does come back that this was an airline issue or a human error, could be, you could see how that would impact some of their other businesses within that region, especially because there's already a lot of people who've already said, I'm not flying Indian Air.
Yeah.
Or India Air anytime soon.
Oh, Air India.
Air India, excuse me.
Yeah. Doug, who is joining us live, it's always good to hear from Doug. He says the rat dropped. The ram air turbine indicating a loss of power. The rotating Airstream turbine deploys automatically on loss of power. So, I mean, Doug's got a theory, and I mean, it's more sound than anything I've got.
It's definitely more, yeah.
I mean, well, that's one thing that I really enjoy about our viewers and listeners is that, they are the ones making these engines, making these planes, designing these planes. And so when theories come in, they got a little bit more behind them than
absolutely.
Your average Twitter theory out there.
Thanks, Doug.
All right. Well, our most popular story this week, auto giant files for bankruptcy, blames tariffs. Anna teased this one a little bit, but the Wall Street Journal says it is, quote, the first big casualty of the tariff war. Marelli, an auto parts giant and supplier to Stellantis and Nissan, has filed for bankruptcy protection. The company is known for its electronics, powertrain, and lighting products, but had been struggling with heavy debt and supply chain challenges over the last few years. But when revealing its filing, company leaders identified something else. Marelli CEO David Slump cited, quote, macroeconomic headwinds associated with tariffs as the tipping point that caused the company's situation to get worse. Slump says pandemic-era supply chain issues restricted the company's access to both labor and parts, including semiconductors. The company invested heavily in the EV transition and was struggling with liquidity when new woes hit this year. Slump says Marelli was, quote, severely affected by tariffs due to its import-export focused business and the imposition of tariffs specifically against automotive manufacturers and suppliers. Marelli was formed in 2019 when a private equity firm merged 100-year-old Japanese parts business Magneti Marelli with a Fiat Chrysler auto parts business. The resulting tie-up has 40,000 employees, more than 150 locations in 23 countries, including the United States. Marelli will continue operating. It reached a deal with its lenders and creditors to bring in more than $1 billion in financing for the company's restructuring. Anna, is Marelli the canary in the coal mine?
I don't know. That's a very difficult question to answer. I know people are asking it. But I do think that, and, quite possibly Jeff and I are going to have the exact same debate again that we had with At Home. But I do think it illustrates, this situation illustrates what we have been talking about over the past few months as it relates to tariffs. Some of our commenters on the web, they rushed to point out that there were, again, multiple variables at stake here. Of course, mounting debt, supply chain challenges, heavy investments in new categories like EVs. Yes, absolutely true. All factors. But in my opinion, the tariffs maybe were the tipping point here. They feel like an unforced error that caused this, crumbling structure that's barely hanging on to maybe topple over.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say that, that there are certain companies that just have they're just more exposed to what tariffs bring to the environment.
Yeah.
And if you're working in a global environment where you're sourcing heavily from other countries that now your margins are significantly compressed, then absolutely that will impact your ability to be profitable. And if you're in a turnaround situation or about to get there, it's of course going to impact your ability to do that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think, we see it here. We saw it with At Home. I saw another story the next day about a manufacturer of custom cut veneer products out of Pennsylvania who said this week that they'll close in August and lay off 81 workers. They identified rising labor costs and labor shortages also, but a tense international trade environment and China's import ban on American logs that they say is an issue that, quote, played a particularly decisive role in their decision to close their company.
Yeah.
It's getting to the point where maybe this stuff isn't actually anecdotal anymore. And to your question about, is it a canary in the coal mine? I don't know if that's specific to automotive supply. The article points out that automotive, according to analysts, is particularly exposed to some of the downsides of the tariff environment. Or is it going to impact companies just here and there in every sector who are just not quite built to manage the extra stress of it? I don't know. I just think we have to be concerned that this is going to be a straw that breaks the camel's back for some businesses. Obviously, the EV transition cannot escape responsibility here. Mm-hmm. I think Marelli was particularly invested in preparing for that shift, and then some of its key customers pulled back a little bit on their projections, as we've covered this extensively in the podcast, of course. Yeah. That had to hurt, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But again, we're talking about like all the things put together, and is this the final push over the cliff? I don't know.
No, I mean, you mentioned the woodworking company manufacturer. Today, I wrote the story about Hasbro's cutting 3% of their workforce directly impacted by tariffs. I mean, and there is no questioning whether or not the toy industry was going to be hit by that. So part of it for me was the shift in the tone with these stories has been odd, because this was the first one, right? Like, and this was the first one where everyone kind of took a step back and they were just like, whoa, like,
it's coming.
It's coming. Mm-hmm. This is a major automotive parts supplier. And like, but I think that the tone has also been like, now that we've had more than a handful of stories in the last 7 days, you start to all of a sudden get that skepticism because everyone's talking about that being the reason. And then people are just like, oh, okay, you're just going to blame tariffs for everything. But that's why this story I think was the most popular on the site and stood out, because this was the first, big one to fall. And I don't know, Jeff, when you look at these stories, I mean, some of them, like, global automotive parts supplier, like, you can understand how tariffs could,
Here's the problem. The same problem we have with these stories, or our whole dialogue on this, is the same problem that the Trump administration has in applying these tariffs. Yeah. They're lumping everything together. Yeah. You can't do that. Yeah. Each one of these situations is unique. Each market sector is unique. Yeah. When it comes to, for this particular company, we want to talk about this as a canary in the coal mine for automotive suppliers. It's not. This company has been in trouble since day one. Yeah. It's never been in a positive place. As recently as 2022, it declared bankruptcy. It was $9.5 billion in debt. No. I mean, it's never been operating efficiently. Yeah. Why do you have 150 plants in 23 countries if you're not profitable? Yeah. There's obviously internal issues here. And I know that they're one of these companies that I think could be looked at as maybe too big to fail because of who they supply. Yeah. And their suppliers are, when you look at Stellantis and Nissan, thank you, who they're working with here, they want this company to stand up and they want these suppliers close to their manufacturing facilities. But at some point, Marelli has to be like, we need to reshift before we get in trouble. Yeah. Now, I disagree with Anna when she talks about this being sort of the last straw. I think, quite honestly, this probably expedited what was going to happen anyway, whether it's these guys or At Home. Now, aside from that, when we look at some of these other smaller manufacturers in some of these other markets, there is no doubt that the tariffs are impacting them in a highly negative way.
Yeah.
Okay. And those are the industries we need to pay attention to.
Right.
Going back to my point, where these tariffs can help should have been somebody like Morelli. Now we're looking at about in the U.S. and they didn't disclose, I think, which plants they're shutting down or how they're going to cut workforce.
Yeah.
There is a couple of plants in Michigan, employs like 500 people.
Mm-hmm.
These should have been the jobs that are being supported through these tariffs because it's going to make things more competitive. But when you're looking at a global company who's operating in 23 other countries, that's not how they're going to, that isn't how they work. Mm-hmm. So in this instance, as well as the last one, blaming tariffs or using that to sort of drive the narrative or the dialogue is wrong.
Yeah.
Because it does muddy the waters and it takes away from the areas where the tariffs are having a negative impact.
That's what I was
when we
say.
look at toys, when we look at a lot of the material type individuals, when we look at the smaller companies, textiles, all that kind of stuff that we shouldn't, number one, be trying to get more of those jobs here because they're tough to get in the first place and tough to preserve, but we shouldn't be just giving them up and sacrificing them either in the sake of trying to, fix our trade imbalance in all these other bigger categories.
Yeah.
So again, lumping it all together is wrong on both ends.
Yeah.
We need to look at them on an individual market sector basis and do what's right there, not on a geographic basis. That's where all this is flawed.
Well, but I do agree with that. Like when tariffs are blamed for everything, then no one's going to, on a case-by-case basis, look at the true impact that they had on each company. I mean, don't you think?
I don't understand why, we've seen the data around like consumer spending pulling back and jobs being cut and plants being closed, like for no benefit so far, globally. I don't understand why we're like, well, like,
why it's immediately blame the victim.
Yeah, I just like this is not something that anybody wants to be dealing with. Like 2/3 of CEOs say that they think tariffs are going to hurt their businesses.
Yeah.
Like, so when we see the businesses get hurt, that's shouldn't come as a surprise to us.
But the problem there is, Anna, you say 2/3 of those businesses, and probably 60 out of 66% of those are valid, and it is going to hurt them because they have a successful, thriving business that now they have to deal with another factor that they shouldn't have to deal with. But the ones that get headlines are those 6% that probably were on their way down anyway, and as opposed to admitting or holding themselves accountable, they're using this narrative to blame for their losses.
If it accelerates the decline of a company that is like still functioning and still employing people, that's okay with us?
No, it's not okay, but I think it's that it kind of steals the spotlight.
It masks the real issues that we have here because you can look at all these companies present the wrong narrative here as to why we need to fix this and get the tariff thing right.
The tariffs are impacting many companies in a negative way. I think that's the takeaway.
That's not what I'm saying here is when you look at a company like Morelli, they're hiding behind that as opposed to looking at the real reason that they're losing money and had to declare bankruptcy.
Or not the real reason, all the reasons. Like there are the tariff situation is one of many financial problems.
And
that
all of these companies have said that.
Yes,
like, hey, these were our issues. The tariffs, have not helped that. Like we are, that making things worse for us. We don't think we can come out of it. Like that.
But they don't go into that much depth. They lead with saying it's tariffs.
I don't think they led with it. I think that the Wall Street Journal led with it.
Yeah.
I think because they pull it out of their, statement that they make about the situation, but there's 10 things in there, So like if people want to blame the Wall Street Journal for their headline, that's one thing, but I don't think that if tariffs are impacting your margins or they're impacting consumer buying behavior or the companies that you supply, why can't you say that? Like you can say that.
You can, yes. I agree. Like you can say that. And I think that more people should be listening when it's like we have this problem when everyone blames the same thing. All of a sudden, like people start thinking that they're lying about it. That's when the conspiracy theories come out and they're just like, well, this can't be affecting everybody. I don't know. And I agree, like, that when it comes to people are looking for any reason to say, like, to discount what's actually happening, right? And I think that people do need to face, like, both sides of it. One, that, tariffs can be the final nail that hurts an already struggling company, and that's bad. And tariffs also hurt companies that were doing just fine, and now they're really struggling, and that's also bad. But I don't think we should discount the story just because, it's already one of the YouTube comments said, large companies have been going bankrupt and closing stores for years. We need to shake out of these debt-laden zombie companies. The economy has been addicted to low interest and QE stimulus diets since 2008. I guess a lot of people seem to be piling on the blaming tariffs for poor financial decisions, which this person says is hilarious. But I mean, I don't understand. I think don't you think part of it is how everything has become politicized, become a political talking point, right? It's either tariffs good, tariffs bad. It can't just be tariffs caused this issue. Discuss, right?
Of many. Yeah. I don't know.
Wolfnot says more like poor management. Well, come on, give us more than that, Wolfnot. Anyway,
we had this during COVID too.
Yes.
We had this during COVID where there were companies saying that COVID is the reason they went out of business, and they had a lot of other problems. But again, maybe if COVID hadn't happened, they would still be in business. It's just it's really hard to know, but I don't think that we should say automatically because they bring up tariffs that they were already circling the drain.
Yeah. That's not my point.
Yeah.
The point is it's each individual incident that needs to be looked at more deeply before you go one way or the other.
I do not disagree with that.
Well, and that's why I go back to my initial question about, is it the new scapegoat? Because no matter what it is that's happening in our culture, whatever's the most popular, someone's going to be like, nope, it was that. It was that, and that's why we went under, and it is their fault, and it is not ours, certainly. Thank you. That's all we're going to say. No more questions.
That's not what everybody said, though.
I understand.
We painted a complex picture here. I feel like we don't.
I understand. Anyway. I understand. I apologize for summarizing the piece of art we had created into a tiny little tidbit that I was going to jump off.
It was a mosaic.
We've been gluing colorful pebbles together
Leave
for
it
hours.
Intact. It's going to be a beautiful.
David just threw a bucket of paint on it.
Yeah.
Right? I just came walking right through before anything dried. I'm sorry. Before we jump into, in case you missed it, the stories that weren't as popular on our websites, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward, we have another word from our sponsor. This week's episode is brought to you by our friends at SugarCRM. If your sales team is struggling to close deals, you need to read How to Close More Deals in Manufacturing, a new guide to modern, insight-driven sales. Many manufacturers sit on mountains of data about their customers. Few sales teams leverage it all to unlock new sales opportunities, boost pipeline output, strengthen customer relationships, and realize complementary sales add-ons. So stop missing out on these new sales and download How to Close More Deals in Manufacturing right now. There is a link to it. Doug, click it in the live chat and in the body copy. All right. In case you missed it, the stories that maybe weren't as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Jeff, what do you have for us this week?
Well, just to show that I do have sympathies towards the impact some of these tariffs are having on manufacturers, I picked an article here talking about how tariffs are stifling innovation at small U.S. businesses.
All right.
Yeah.
Because, again,
yeah,
every situation is unique. Now, this is a long article. It's a great article. Has a number of great examples of situations where companies basically, because they're sourcing materials from overseas and it's part of their business model, now they're trying to figure out what's going on with these tariffs. And they don't have the resources to put towards developing new products. Yeah. Some of these companies, whether it's a home goods manufacturer or Learning Resources is one of the companies here, which basically is kids' toys.
Yeah,
they've got people working on other things as opposed to developing new products, which is the absolute lifeblood of any company, especially a manufacturer. Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest takeaway here was, again, we've talked about not just the tariffs themselves, but so much of the uncertainty surrounding them.
Yeah.
Everybody involved with this administration has just been so weak in terms of the direction that they're going to go here. What is actually going to take place? Because they'll head in one direction and then in a month later, they'll reverse it or they'll change it or they'll adjust it. Or there's talk about things with China being different now. We've got a framework in place. Maybe that'll bring things down, but maybe not, but not today. Could be next week, whatever. That leaves small businesses in just such a state of flux that, again, they're used to developing 100 new products every year. They're not even doing half of that.
Yeah.
The thing that caught me was Learning Resources CEO Rick Waldenberg stated that roughly 25 to 30% of the 350 employees at his educational toy company's headquarters. Now, that's not a small company. 350 employees, a quarter to a third of them, including product developers, are working at least part-time on tariff-related tasks. They're not making stuff. They're not developing stuff. They're not improving stuff. They're not selling stuff. They're figuring out how to deal with these tariffs because there is a lack of clarity in terms of what to expect and what is going on. He doesn't know if he should stop looking at China and start looking at Vietnam. What is the next step? What makes sense? Because all we've done is levy the penalty without giving solutions.
Yeah.
And this is an area where these guys are not going to manufacture products here. They're not. It doesn't make any sense. The costs would go up 200% and they couldn't employ 350 people anymore.
Yeah.
So again, looking at the individual elements of how these tariffs are impacting manufacturers throughout the country, that's what we need to do. We can't do, and we've said this since day one, it cannot be a catch-all. This doesn't work across the board. And as a result, a lot of these small companies are feeling a ridiculous level of pressure because of the inconsistency and the lack of clarity surrounding these tariffs. It's going to continue.
Talking about the tariff risk exposure and how that has consumed businesses. I heard that a lot at Automate. You know, people that were launching new websites, people launching new products, people that were, you know, all business operations stopped because they had to go line by line of a catalog of 50,000 SKUs and say, this one's at risk, this one's not, this one's at risk, this one's not. And I mean, that was pretty manual. It's not like you could just throw that into ChatGPT and be like, hey, let me know where we come out on this.
Well, and the other thing is part of this was bringing more manufacturing back. Well, again, we already said a lot of this isn't coming back.
Yeah.
But the other part is, how do you make stuff if you're not developing new stuff?
Yeah. Well, and that was,
how do you grow?
Well, and that was one part of this article that it was Sonia Lipinski. She's the managing director at a consulting firm, Alex Partners. She kind of talked about limiting the amount of people who are dealing with the tariff talk internally, so that way you continue your product creation cycles or product development. You know, we always talk about, like, in times of struggle, the companies that continue innovating are the ones that come out ahead. And, you know, so she said that maybe while you might be coming up with smaller products, you need to be coming, or fewer products, you need to be trying to right now create new products that'll really be attention-grabbing innovations now and in the future. So, you know, it's about adjusting to the new climate and trying to figure it out. Anna, what did you think of this? Was it a surprising pick for you of Jeff's?
That's so many layers.
That's okay, though. Yeah, I mean, it's a very complex situation, to say the least. And I think, you know, that leads me to, you know, my other point around this is, like, you know, so there's been all this talk about bringing manufacturing back here. And as you said, there's certain industries that will never come back. But for the industries that are here, on paper, it looks like they have a competitive advantage, but very few of them have zero foreign input costs. So they're not, you know, very few of them are completely 100% sourcing domestically and also assembling and producing domestically and then selling everything here. Mm-hmm. So as their costs go up, they have to charge more. It's just it's just challenging to see how this works. You know, like, we've seen study after study. They do these studies every single year, and they ask people, you know, do you support more domestic manufacturing? And almost everybody does, right? Yeah. Like, vehemently, yes. And then would you pay more for products that are made in the United States if you had to pay 20% more, for example? For and by and large, people say no.
Yeah.
So
what are you, nuts?
Right. What are you, nuts? I can't afford that.
Yeah.
So that puts us in a pretty difficult situation when it comes to, encouraging these domestic manufacturers to just continue on with, like you said, with no support system into how then do they remain competitive when we know we're adding to their cost profile as well?
Well, and there's a trickle down effect on the retailers, distribution market, logistics, all of that as well.
All right. For my, in case you missed it this week, I chose the story Frito-Lay stops manufacturing at 55-year-old Rancho Cucamonga facility because it's the end of a legacy. Say goodbye to the birthplace of the flamin' hot Cheeto. Frito-Lay has been making salty snacks at its Rancho Cucamonga facility in California since 1970. PepsiCo Foods USA, or just US, is shutting down manufacturing operations at the site. A small bright spot is that the warehouse distribution, fleet, and transportation teams will continue to operate at the locations. Still, hundreds of workers are going to be impacted. I chose the story, one, just because this company has been in Rancho Cucamonga for 55 years, an incredible legacy, created a lot of innovative new products, because this, to me, was a sign of the times and how they're changing. Like when it comes to moving towards more better for you snacks, and we've seen it with all these companies, like all the acquisitions that PepsiCo Foods has recently in these smaller, healthier snack food options. To me, this was kind of, a sign of things that might be more to come, especially when, PepsiCo's been talking about how, they've also been hit by a lot of volatility and uncertainty when it comes to tariff costs, the drops in consumer spending that we've been talking about all day today. They admitted that they, got caught up in shrinkflation practices and tried, increasing the sizes of snack bags and bags and multi-pack, stuff like that, but it really hasn't seemed to work. And it might just be like that perfect storm right now where, people kind of got fed up and, people are just making healthier choices by and large. Not in my house, but, other places apparently. And I was kind of surprised because this was one of those legacy Frito-Lay plants that's been around forever. And, regardless of where you come down on who invented the flaming hot Cheeto and how that happened, its origin story, it was still sad to see it go. Jeff, I don't know if you had a chance to check out the story, but what were you thinking about the closure in California?
Sad, obviously, kind of a legacy type of dynamic here. I think the one thing that came to my mind, though, is of all the types of facilities that you wouldn't mind having in your backyard, this might top the list.
Oh, yeah.
Man,
you talked about the Cheeto, right? Like right off the line?
That was what the guy said on the plane when I was coming back from a food. Maybe I've shared this before.
Yeah.
Coming back from a food show, and I was talking to the guy on the plane, and he was somebody who went around, did a lot of auditing for the equipment that they were putting into these facilities. He said, the best thing he's ever had was a Cheeto straight off the line, right out of the oven.
I bet that's good.
Oh man, when my parents worked at a Nestle plant, the best thing was when they would bring home all the stuff that was like too big or too small to actually put in the packaging. How weird do you think a Cheeto has to get for that not to be marketable? Just like, was there an entire store with like funky hand-shaped and sized Cheetos?
Scratch and dent Cheetos?
Oh my God.
Chili cheese Fritos, definitely the top of my list.
Oh.
Yeah? I mean, those flaming hot Cheetos on a peanut butter sandwich. Come on now.
PB and whatever, huh?
That's right. That's right. I mean, stick with what works. And that worked almost once. Anna, what were your thoughts on the plant closure with Frito-Lay?
Well, it encouraged me to look up what the generic alternatives are to Flamin' Hot Cheetos, because I haven't ever seen them before, but they do exist.
Okay.
Great Value Hot Cheese Crunch is one. Clancy's, that's Aldi's brand.
Mm-hmm.
Clancy's Cheese Curls Fiery Hot.
Mm-hmm.
Fiery
Hot.
That seems like more of a David Manty buy.
Well, I've got to say, when it comes to generic alternatives, the one that never comes close for me personally is the Cheetos knockoff. Like never.
Oh,
like,
really?
The only one that's kind of come close was like Dots started making Cheetos knockoffs.
Those were terrible.
I still have heartburn from when we had those. Like we brought them into the office.
Yeah.
I had 3 and had to go home with some sort of mild medical emergency.
Just stick with the original with Dots.
Yeah.
All the other stuff is fine, but just stick with the original.
No, I totally get it. But no, so Anna, like I get it, like generic. I've switched to generic in so many things, tortilla chips, right? But like when it comes to a Cheeto, I'm still bringing home Chester.
Yeah, we should do some sort of a panel taste test.
Bring back the taste test?
To see how these really stack up.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I'm more of a jalapeno Cheetos person than a Flamin' Hot. I don't know if you guys
There's jalapeno Cheetos? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this sounds like a great day.
Do yourself a favor, Jeff.
Yeah.
Give those a try.
Well, we will get that taste test on the calendar because that's fun for everybody.
Let's do it.
What's your not final thought? What's your in case you missed it this week?
So I'll try to keep this quick since I spent way too much time yelling about tariffs on this podcast. I used up my time already. I picked a story about Amazon and how they want to make 10,000 Robotaxis every year at their new factory, which is in Silicon Valley. So it looks like Amazon is gearing up to try to challenge Waymo in the self-driving taxi category, and also Tesla if they ever get around to deploying their long-awaited Robotaxi service.
Oh, yeah.
That we keep hearing about. So this is a 200,000 plus square foot facility. It was announced on Wednesday, and it's, according to this report, heralds a new phase in Amazon's push into a technological frontier that began taking shape in 2009 when Waymo was launched as a secret project within Google. So as we know, since then, Waymo has made a lot of progress. They are running Robotaxi service in Phoenix. I think they're...
Austin, maybe?
Oh.
I don't know.
Yeah, they're testing out other markets.
Yeah.
They have some in Los Angeles, I think, Austin. And Amazon's brand Zoox, they bought 5 years ago. They think that they can lure passengers with vehicles that look more like carriages than cars with seating up to 4 passengers.
A carriage, eh?
Yeah, they're very boxy, almost like a mini bus.
Oh, like the kind of like what Canoe was working with?
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
My question is this. As I was reading this and about we've been watching this market for years, but all the money that's been dumped into this market and so much dev, and it's finally getting to the point where some of the rollouts are starting to take place, but there's still a lot to be done, and people are starting to exit the market because they're realizing that they can't do it.
Yeah.
GM for one.
Cruise, yeah.
So I'm just curious if this is Robotaxis kind of going the way of EVs, where the market projections were just so hard to make because it was a completely new category.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it has some of the same, some similarities with the EV rollout. One, it's very cost intensive.
Yeah.
It
but
also
can be highly automated.
Could be highly automated, of course. And then I think they also kind of require some change management from the consumer standpoint where people are a little bit skeptical of using them still.
Yeah.
And it's going to take some practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
For people to build up that comfort level. Because still, when you look at the surveys that are being put out in this industry, people are still no, thank you, largely. More than not.
Unless they want to stream themselves live. Oh, man, well, look, there's nobody there.
Yeah.
Well, I was at that cybersecurity conference out in San Francisco. They had Waymos running around. I didn't see a lot of people in them.
Yeah.
Because even there, when you're dealing with a bunch of highly technical people, they're like, I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like not having a person in that vehicle.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think there's going to, you're going to have to get over your fear of what happens if I get stranded somewhere, or what happens if this thing takes off in the wrong direction, or
locks me inside.
Or, there's all kinds of fears of this unknown tech that I think we'll have to play. It will probably take much longer to play out than maybe the people who work in the tech sector believe. In middle America, are people ready for this? I know you are in Silicon Valley. Are people in...
But that was even San Francisco, which is, kind of in that neighborhood. Yeah. And people were still... I didn't see people in those Waymos running around. They were empty.
So I guess, that's my question for you guys. Like, do you think that even with the players in this industry getting whittled down further and further and further, is there still too much money and focus on it now?
I think it's very prescient. I'm actually hotter on Robotaxis than I was on the expectations for the EV transition, just because it's smaller, right? Like you don't need to replace every gas powered vehicle with an EV, right? Now we're just talking about like a few cars and a few communities, getting people like slow rolling to mass adoption, right? So I'm a little bit more confident in it, but I mean, that said, I do see some of the same sort of red flags along the way that look like, oh, okay. I mean, also, it's just another fun story where like it's, Amazon comes out with Robotaxi to compete with Tesla. And it's just kind of fun at this point. It's like Team Bezos and Team Musk are just like, what's he doing over there? Oh, right. Go buy me one. It's called Zooks. Can we rename it? No, we're going to keep it. Are you sure? Because it's called Zooks.
So lame.
Dude, it's fiery.
Well, it's just, I don't know, Jeff. Like,
Cheeto.
What do you think about... No, the nickname's been ruined now. What do you think about that name, Zooks? Would you sooner jump into a Zooks or a Waymo?
Neither inspire a ton of confidence. I think in order for this to take off, it needs to be introduced in some sort of environment where people almost don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Whether it's like, going from the rental car to your gate at the airport, so people could get used to not seeing a driver up there. Because otherwise, on a city street, especially if you're not familiar with that city, nobody's going to trust it.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I've had a couple of drivers that after I got out, did not trust them. But I mean,
in those instances, who gave who a lower rating? You or the driver, Gabe?
Yeah, I probably still got the worst.
Yeah.
We're getting up there though. Building
right.
it back.
Attaboy.
Building it back. I didn't even know
Proud
you
of
could get rated by Uber drivers until we were like 10 years in. I didn't stand a chance.
You're getting rated by the free bus shuttle that takes you to the rental car agency also?
Yes, I didn't realize it. It's all numbers. Like it's all that Black Mirror episode. It's all real. Well, before we get out of here, let's do our final thoughts. Anna, what's your final thought this week?
My kids are starting their day camp next week for summer vacation, and they are all very excited except for one component. They're very concerned about swim lessons being at the cold pool.
Oh, no.
And man, I'm just like, you kids have it so good.
Yeah.
That is your worst thing that you have to look forward to
pool?
this summer, is that the pool is too cold because you have a really warm pool at your gym.
Yeah.
Have you dropped the uphill to school both ways type lecture
I feel
on them
like they need a fresh speech.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll give it today.
Because when I laid on stuff like, growing up, we didn't have cable TV or air conditioning. That blew their minds.
I do like to tell them that.
They could not imagine an existence that had either one of those things.
Oh, I love to tell them, like, that we didn't get to choose what we wanted to watch, right? Like, we just, whatever was on, we had to.
There's only one device in the whole house.
Yeah. And then Bill Cosby was on, and we all watched it as a family. And then we went to bed.
That was it.
That was
what maybe you caught 5 minutes in Night Court before.
Yeah. I was like, let me tell you about TGIF.
Yeah,
okay.
If you're,
this is going to blow you away.
If you brushed your teeth first, you might get an extra 5 minutes. No, that's man, talk about first world problems. That was we were I was at my in-laws this weekend, and we were all swimming, having a good time. I was in there with the boys, and like you get that initial like, woohoo, you just feel it. And it's just like, no, we didn't just feel it. Like, we've had the solar cover on for a little bit. Just like, you sure? But then you just start moving around. You have a great time. And then none of the other adults got in. It was just like, dip a toe. Nope, not doing it. I'm like, come on, just get in. We're in a very clean pool, having a great time. It was like 88 degrees. It was awesome. Just burnt me to a crisp. Oh my God. I'm lucky that I stopped molting as much as I was like for the podcast, and I could actually be semi-presentable. Just like my kids are like, your face is falling off, Dad. I'm like, thanks, bud. Really helps. My final thought this week is just that I started coaching rookie ball again. And, I was always able to plan it where I played softball on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and then I could do rookie ball or baseball on Mondays and Thursdays. And this was the first year that I had to make a choice between softball for myself or rookie ball for the kids. And I made the choice to coach rookie ball for the kids. And like, even though it tears me up inside, I absolutely love it. And there is just something about helping small kids learn how to play a sport and just when the light goes off in their head, when you show them how to throw, and like, just for an example, how to throw a baseball, it's just like, no, bud, just here, then here, then here, and just step where you're throwing it. And they throw it for the first time really well. And they're like, oh, and you're like, yes,
I've done it.
And I love it. I'm still working on, there's increasing scales of competition. And I understand that maybe I was expecting a little bit more from the kids. I took a little heat from the stands when I told a kid to take 2. And they're like, take 2? What are we doing here? We're just teaching the kids. I'm like, I don't know. We hit a shot to the outfield. I figured I'd let them leg it out. So we're still working on it. But just encouraging everyone that can out there. It doesn't matter what skill set you have. There is a tremendous need for coaches in every sport possible. And there are kids out there that could really use your help. So highly encourage it. It fills your soul. Even if you have to make personal sacrifices, I couldn't recommend it more. I love it. Also, like, just if you do like getting in like mild confrontations with parents, that's also really fun too. It's kind of like a new sport, just like, where are you coming at me with?
David, do you tell the kids that if they work hard enough, that someday they could be number 2?
No, I let them know pretty straight. I'm just like, hey, you're probably maxing out here. But either way, we can still have fun, If you're, if you really put your nose to the grindstone, you can get that silver medal one day. Jeff, your final thought this week.
Coaching kids is great.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Second that 100%. We've got a small remodeling project going on this week. And I think if my wife and I make it through this without divorce or bodily harm to one another, we'll be doing great because it's our bedroom. And you never realize how much crap you have in there until you have to move it and find a new place for it and then move it back a short time later, hopefully.
Yeah.
So, if anybody's got any tips on how to manage that situation a little more effectively, let me know.
There isn't.
When you clean out a woman's closet,
that
is a slippery slope.
I have learned that you don't say things like, would you like me to move this to the garage or Goodwill? That doesn't help you. Don't say stuff like that. Just say,
no, it doesn't.
Yeah, yes,
that,
ma'am,
that
may
I would
I have
have
another?
Guessed. That I would have guessed. But I appreciate the input.
That's total role reversal. It's normally the opposite way where she's just like, do you need this? And I'm like, I absolutely do. And she's like, what am I even holding? I'm like, I don't know, but I love it. What are you doing it yourself? Or is it like,
no.
Oh, well, because I mean that, like if you're doing it yourself, I mean, that can tear some people apart.
After the shower head debacle of last weekend, no, Jeff's not doing it himself.
I think we've established I'm a call the guy.
Okay.
I'm the call the guy.
Okay. I mean, you got room in the house. Just,
No, this is like a closet and trim and.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by subscribing to the podcast wherever you get it, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, Anna, or David at IN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. And share it with your friends. Help us out. We really appreciate you getting us to number 2. Let's get to number 1 next year. That'll be great. We'll be even more animated.
We're coming for you, Gemba Academy.
That's right. Taking you down. We know that you've been here a long time, but this is our house. All right. For Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the number 2 manufacturing podcast, the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we will see you next week.